My name is Marissa, and for as long as I can remember, I believed that staying meant fighting, that holding on meant proving my love, that silence and acceptance of things as they were was a sign of strength. I was taught that loyalty meant never giving up, even in the face of pain. But sometimes the bravest act isn't to endure or to stay, but to summon the courage to leave behind what harms you. This is my story of that day, the day I chose to walk away, and how that choice rewrote the rest of my life. I grew up in a small Midwestern town where everyone knew your name and your business. Our house was modest, nestled on a quiet street lined with maples that turned brilliant shades of orange each fall. In that town, the rules were simple: work hard, be nice, and never rock the boat. I followed those rules, believing that conformity was the safest bet. I was raised to be dependable, to never complain, and to stick with my family through thick and thin. And for many years, I did. I carried on with a smile, masking the pain that simmered beneath the surface. My father, a quiet, hard-working man, believed that any problem in the family could be solved by togetherness. My mother, gentle but strong, always said that every hardship was temporary if you stayed united. I watched as they sacrificed much for the sake of preserving our family's image. Even as we weathered storms, losses, bitter quarrels, unspoken resentments, they clung to the idea that staying together meant strength. I admired them, and I wished I could be as resilient, as unyielding, as forgiving. Then came the day when everything felt too heavy. I was in my early 20s, living in the same town where I'd grown up, working a job I had outgrown but never had the courage to leave, because leaving home felt like betraying everything I'd been taught. I had a boyfriend, Daniel, a gentle soul who understood me and cared deeply. For a while, it seemed like I had everything: a stable life, a semblance of peace, and people who loved me. But beneath that calm surface, a quiet storm was gathering. I began to realize that my world was built on unspoken sacrifices and hidden truths. Friends who never said what needed to be said. Family members whose love was unconditional, but whose silence about personal pain was deafening. And me, who had learned to smile through all the hurt by believing that walking away was never an option. I always thought that if I just held on tight enough, everything would eventually be okay. I convinced myself that leaving was a sign of failure, of weakness. I pretended that I was strong by staying, even when each day felt like a battle against an invisible weight on my chest. It started with small things: a comment overheard in a conversation, the hush that fell over the dinner table when I mentioned how overwhelmed I was. I would swallow my feelings, believing that if I simply did not speak up, the pain wouldn't matter. But as the months passed, the cracks in my heart deepened. I began to see the toll on Daniel as well. He tried to comfort me, to urge me to be honest about my feelings. But every time I opened my mouth, the fear of upsetting the fragile balance stopped me. One autumn evening, when the trees were aflame with color and the air was crisp with promise, I found myself alone in my room, sitting by the window. I stared out at the world below and wondered how I had come to accept so much pain as normal. That night, after a particularly long day of quiet suffering, I made a promise to myself. I would choose to walk away from the chains of complacency. I decided that I would no longer allow fear to hold me hostage, and that choice, though terrifying, became the turning point of my life. I began by writing a letter, not to anyone else, but to myself. I poured every thought and every tear onto the paper, admitting truths I had long concealed. I wrote about the sleepless nights when my heart ached with loneliness, even in a crowded room, about the stifled cries in the middle of a family dinner, and about the desperate longing for a life where I could be my true self, someone who was not afraid to speak up and be heard. That letter was raw and painful and honest. It forced me to confront the reality I had been avoiding for so long. The following day, I stood before the mirror for what felt like an eternity. I stared deeply into my own eyes, and I saw fear, but also hope. I realized that my fear had been a prison of my own making. It had kept me silent, kept me from experiencing the fullness of life, and for the first time, I felt the stirrings of a new strength rising within me. The strength to say no when I no longer wanted to surrender my joy. The strength to walk away when staying meant surrendering my soul. That day, I told Daniel everything. I told him about the hidden sorrow that had haunted me for years, the secrets I had buried under layers of polite smiles and forced laughter. I confessed that I was no longer willing to let the weight of unspoken pain define who I was. I told him that I had chosen to finally choose to walk away from that old, suffocating version of myself. I remember his eyes well, teary, conflicted, but filled with an understanding that I had never seen before. He held my hands and said, "I'm proud of you for finding your voice, even if it hurts right now. I love you, and I'll support you no matter what you decide." His words were like balm to my wounded soul. For once, I felt seen and understood, as if someone recognized the battles I had long fought in silence. With Daniel's support, I began to make changes. I left the job that had made me feel like I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of mediocrity. I sought out new opportunities that honored my true self. I reached out to old friends and made new ones, people who valued honesty and vulnerability over pretense and fear. I even started attending support groups where I could share my journey with others who had known the pain of staying silent. Each step I took was small but deliberate, a step toward reclaiming the part of me I had lost. It wasn't easy. The decision to walk away, to break free, often left me feeling isolated and uncertain. I received criticism from those who believed I was abandoning the familiar, from those who said that hard work and perseverance meant never giving up, no matter how hard things got. But deep inside, I knew that my choice wasn't about giving up. It was about finally giving in to the truth of who I was meant to be. There were days when the memories of my old life, the life I had endured in silence, crept back and filled me with regret. I recalled moments when I had buried my voice, when I had pleaded inwardly for the courage to speak up, but instead remained mute. I thought about the pain I had allowed to mount, the weight I had carried for so long, and I wept, not only for what I had lost, but for what I might have gained if I had never been afraid. Yet, amidst that sorrow, there was a growing sense of possibility. I realized that my journey had taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, self-respect, and the transformative power of honesty. Every day, I learned to celebrate even the smallest victories, like voicing an opinion in a meeting or standing up for myself when I felt misunderstood. These moments, though modest, were building blocks of a new me, a me that no longer hid behind silence. Months turned into years, and gradually the wounds began to heal. I
developed a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be strong. True strength, I discovered, isn't about suppressing your emotions or bottling up your pain. It is about embracing your vulnerabilities and daring to share them. I learned that when you speak your truth, you open the door for others to do the same. My decision to walk away from the confines of fear had not only liberated me, it had inspired those around me to examine their own quiet battles. I started a blog chronicling my journey, a space where I could share the triumphs and setbacks of choosing to live authentically. To my surprise, people began to reach out, sharing their own stories of finding the courage to speak up. The connections I made through that simple act of honesty became a source of strength that reinforced my belief in second chances, in the transformative nature of vulnerability. Today, I stand as someone who has learned to cherish the power of her own voice. I no longer feel compelled to hide behind polite smiles or empty assurances. I have learned that it's okay to say enough, to say I deserve better, and most importantly, to say I will no longer remain silent. I walked away from the life that had kept me imprisoned by fear, and in doing so, I discovered the road to a brighter, more authentic future. I still remember that fateful day, the day I chose to walk away, as the day I reclaimed my life. It was not an easy choice, nor was it an instant fix, but it was the turning point that showed me that sometimes, when you have nothing left to lose, you have everything to gain. I learned that walking away isn't about giving up on those you love. It's about loving yourself enough to know when it's time to let go, to make space for what's truly meant for you. There are still times when I struggle with doubt and fear. Memories of the past echo in quiet moments, and sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I recall the pain of staying silent, the emptiness of a life dictated by fear, and I remember the empowerment that comes from speaking up, from being true to myself. I know now that I was never weak for having been afraid. I was human, and every scar I bear is a testament to the battles I fought and the courage I summoned. To anyone listening who may be trapped in the silence of their own struggles, I want you to know this. Your voice matters, even when fear whispers that it's safer to hold on.
Beyond the shadows of doubt, lies a strength that is waiting to be awakened. The day you choose to speak up, to stand tall despite the tremors in your heart, can be the day that reshapes your destiny. My journey is far from over. Every day I keep learning, keep growing, and keep finding new layers of courage. I've come to understand that walking away isn't the end. It can be the beginning of a new chapter filled with hope, healing, and endless possibilities. I invite you to take that step whenever you feel overwhelmed by silence. Know that you are not alone, and that the simple act of choosing your truth can light the way for others to do the same. This is the story of how I chose to walk away from pain, from the comfort of what was familiar, from the voices that told me I had to stay. And it is also the story of how I found the courage to speak up, to step into the light, and to live a life that is wholly, unapologetically mine.